Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're completely decoding the 4 biosafety levels. Look, if you've ever felt totally overwhelmed trying to memorize endless lists of lab requirements for your exams, you are in the exactly right place. We're going to use a really strategic level-up framework to make sure you perfectly recall the exact differences, locking this information into your brain for the long haul.
So, here's our game plan. We'll start with the core containment strategy, build our foundation with levels 1 and 2, and then scale all the way up to maximum security. Finally, we'll wrap up with a high-yield visual synthesis and a rapid revision matrix. That's going to be your best friend right before test day.
All right, let's kick things off with our first core concept, the escalation of containment.
To truly master these biosafety levels without getting bogged down by just blind rote memorization, we really need to understand how exams actually test this material. Test writers don't want you to just list everything in a lab, they want to know if you can spot the differences. So the absolute most crucial concept we're using today is the delta. Think of it like leveling up in a video game. You don't need to memorize a whole new redundant set of rules for every single tier, right? You only need to learn this delta, the specific gear and facility upgrades added at each level to beat the next, more dangerous pathogen. Mastering the delta is literally your secret weapon to instantly eliminating wrong answers.
Okay, let's lay down our foundation with our first 2 levels.
We'll establish our baseline with BSL-1. This is where the journey begins, and it is our absolute baseline. We are dealing with low-risk agents here. Standard microbiological practices apply, open benchwork is totally the norm, and you really don't need any special primary or secondary barriers. Personal protective equipment, your basic PPE like lab coats and gloves, are just worn as needed. It's basically your standard, straightforward microbiology setup.
Now, to easily lock BSL-1 into your memory for the long term, I want you to just remember the mnemonic SOS. That stands for a sink for hand washing, open benches for your work, and separate doors separating the lab from the rest of the facility. SOS. It's that simple. If a clinical vignette mentions open benches, your brain should immediately flash SOS and lock in BSL-1.
Stepping up to BSL-2, we're now dealing with moderate-risk agents, and this is where we introduce our first deltas. Things are getting a bit more serious. Access to the laboratory is now restricted. We start seeing biohazard warning signs pop up, we implement strict precautions for any sharps, and we must systematically decontaminate all infectious waste. Our defenses are officially escalating.
To perfectly remember BSL-2, just rely on the rule of 2s. Check out the delta here. BSL-2 introduces 2 eye protectors, goggles, and an easily available eye wash. It also introduces 2 crucial new machines, an autoclave for decontamination and a biological safety cabinet, or BSC, specifically to prevent potential aerosols. Face shields also get added to your PPE list. The rule of 2s is absolutely your best friend for these moderate-risk labs.
With that foundation firmly set, it's time to enter maximum security territory.
Let's see how our baseline builds into the high-risk, heavily restricted environments of BSL-3. The stakes are way higher now. We are dealing with high-risk aerosol-transmitted agents, stuff you breathe in. So the major deltas here are serious. Access is strictly controlled at all times. We introduce directional inward airflow, meaning clean air is constantly flowing toward the contaminated areas, and medical surveillance for all lab workers becomes absolutely mandatory. The safety equipment is significantly escalating here.
You can instantly recall this level by remembering the brilliant mnemonic AIR. 3. A represents the required directional airflow. I stands for 2 interlocked, self-closing doors at the entrance. And R reminds us that respirators and the biological safety cabinet are now mandatory for all activities, not just some. The environment also upgrades to hands-free sinks and eye washes. So, airborne agents, just remember AIR for level 3. Finally, we reach the absolute maximum security of BSL-4. We are talking life-threatening agents here, so the delta is massive. This demands an entirely sealed environment. The practices upgrade heavily. You absolutely must change your clothing before entering, you have to completely decontaminate all materials before exiting, and a chemical shower upon exiting is strictly required.
This ultimate level of protection is all about the SUIT4 mnemonic. S is for showering out. U stands for a unique isolated building or an entirely restricted zone with its own dedicated air supply and exhaust lines. I is for the specialized in-wall double-ended autoclave that passes right through the wall. And T stands for the total positive pressure air-supplied full bodysuit. The worker is completely 100% isolated from the pathogen.
Okay, we've covered the levels. Now let's synthesize all of this visually so it sticks.
To make absolutely sure these deltas stick for exam day, we're going to isolate two highly testable visual progressions. Creating a story out of these elements is exactly how you beat those tricky multiple-choice questions. Think of this first progression as the evolution of the doorway. Exam vignettes frequently use facility entrances as diagnostic clues, so follow this path. We start with just a simple, separate door in BSL-1. That upgrades to a self-closing door in BSL-2. By BSL-3, boom, you have two interlocked doors. Finally, in BSL-4, the doorway is essentially an entire isolated building or restricted zone. If a test question mentions two interlocked doors, you know instantly, without a doubt, you're in BSL-3.
Next, look at the escalating physical barriers between the worker and the pathogen. It's a perfect step-by-step progression. We go from basic PPE as needed in Level 1, up to adding face shields and introducing biological safety cabinets in BSL-2 just for potential aerosols. By BSL-3, respirators are added, and that cabinet is mandatory for all work. And finally, BSL-4 requires those completely sealed, full-body positive pressure suits and that specialized double-ended autoclave.
So the final hurdle for us today is how do we actually consolidate all of these mnemonics, SOS, the rule of twos, AIR, and SUIT, along with these facility deltas, for a rapid high-yield review the night before your test?
Well, it's time for our fast revision finale.
We are mapping out absolutely everything into the ultimate diagnostic cheat sheet. I want you to take a mental snapshot of this consolidated master exam matrix right now. It's perfectly designed for you to spot highlighted keywords in clinical vignettes. If you see medical surveillance or directional airflow, you trace it right back to BSL-3. If you see Sharps precautions or face shields, trace it straight back to BSL-2. This matrix allows you to instantly map the exact practices, equipment, and facilities to their proper level without second-guessing yourself. Remember, it's all about recognizing the delta.
As we wrap up this explainer and you prepare to absolutely dominate your exam, I want to leave you with this final challenge. Using the mnemonics and the logic we've built today, will you be able to instantly spot the exact critical delta that separates a moderate risk lab from a maximum security zone? Master those deltas, eliminate the distractors, and you will master the exam. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep leveling up your knowledge.